Welcome back for episode 3. As we did previously, we're going to start this episode with a little recap of the previous episode and some additional information that's come up during our discussions on the forum. First thing we're going to talk about is deployment zones. Some new information's come up about these that is in the manual, but it's a little hard to find. So we'll talk about it here. I mentioned during the previous discussion that you could color the deployment zones either blue or red, depending on what side you were working on, and that really didn't matter at all to the game. In actuality, it can. So it's good to know. You'll notice that for purposes of illustration, I've drawn a couple of other deployment zones here on the map. I have left one colored black and the other colored blue. The thing to note about this is that when a side, in this case blue, has more than one deployment zone, the player is allowed to copy units between zones that are the same color. So for example, if I right click here on 3 alpha and I do move this to, I can move it down to the other blue zone without any problem. If on the other hand I click move this to and I try to move it to the black zone, it won't do it. So that's actually very handy because it means you can limit units to certain zones, and then other units you can allow the player to reposition as he sees fit in whatever zones you deploy that are of the same color. So that's actually very handy. As I did note in the previous episode, if the units are not enclosed in a deployment zone, the player cannot move them at all. That could be useful if you're doing a historical scenario, for example, where you want the units to start only in the positions they historically occupied. So that's also good to know. The other thing that came to light is that if you hold down the shift key while you're dragging one of the purple handles to resize the deployment zone, holding down the shift key will maintain the ratio of height to width. So in other words, it constrains the proportions of the box. So if you want the scale of the box to increase but you want the shape to remain the same, just hold down the shift key while you drag the handle and the software will maintain that ratio. Now with that out of the way, we can get started on today's episode. One thing I wanted to go over, which also came up in our forum discussion, is the default deployment status of units. When you place a unit on the map, it's going to be in a specific condition. Specifically, it's going to be in a wedge formation and the unit is going to be facing east. Now later on when we start working with the red side units, you'll see how to fix this by using a tactic to control the way the units face. You can also, by right-clicking on them, you can set their formation to something other than wedge if you choose, and you can use any of those that you like. You can also obviously change their spacing. As you'll see later, we can set their tactics. Right now, by default, they'll have no tactics at all. And we can set their fire control. If necessary, we can also divide the unit if we want them to be in sections rather than a platoon. And we'll talk about some of this later on when we get to working with the red units. So I just wanted to make you aware of that when you first place a unit on the map, it will be in the wedge formation, and you can't see it at all here on the map, but it will basically be facing to the east. All right, what I wanted to talk about during this episode was a couple of more useful regions. You'll notice, as I did right here, I've moved off the map. Now, in a normal game, there really isn't anything to prevent the player from doing that. And that's kind of undefined territory, obviously, because we've selected only this region of the original map for our scenario. So what we probably want to do is coerce the player into not doing that. And the way that's typically done is by the placement of penalty zones. So the way you do that is very straightforward. It's just like doing a deployment zone. So if I right-click somewhere here up near the northern border and do New Graphic Rectangle, all right, I'm going to get the usual rectangle, which I can then click on and size as I want. So if I drag the handles over, we'll make it about as wide as the map. And sometimes you have to play with this a little bit to get it to come out just right. And depending on how obsessive compulsive you are, you may find that you need to do more or less of it. I always try to make it as completely square as I can get it, but sometimes I just can't do that, and you have to live with it. So anyway, we want it to be sized just about the width of the map. We can move it around to make that happen. And we probably only want, maybe about a quarter of a kilometer or something of that nature. It doesn't have to be very big. So maybe we do, something like that. Now I usually like to color my deployment or my penalty zones red, so I'm going to set the color to red. And then I usually put in a text message saying that yes, this is in fact a penalty zone. And I like to have the text in red too, so I'll do set text color to red. I usually leave it in the middle, but you can move it just like we did with the objective alpha text. You can slide it wherever you like. And then I'm going to come down here, I'm going to click penalty zone. I'm going to do type. And notice these are all the things that I can penalize that unit with. So if a unit moves into the penalty zone, these are basically all the things that I can do to him. Now I'm going to keep it simple here. I really don't want them to go over there, so I'm going to just say this is a destruction type of penalty zone. All right. Now if I chose, I could exempt some vehicles, like the CO. I'm not going to do that. I think he ought to be just as responsible as his units. And then I can set the likelihood at which this is going to occur. Now, penalty zones are checked every 30 seconds, and there's a 30-second grace period the first time you hit it. So as you go into the zone, you'll essentially get a warning that you're in it, and the effect won't occur for at least 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, it's going to check again. If you're still in there, it's then going to apply the penalty based on this likelihood. So essentially, this is almost like a randomizer. Again, I really don't want them going in there at all, so I'm going to leave it at 100%. So essentially, after 30 seconds in the penalty zone, your unit is going to be destroyed. Okay, so that's our first penalty zone. Now I'm going to make this easy on myself and do copy to other side so that I don't have to repeat the work on the red side. This is also going to have another huge benefit that you'll see here in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to copy it over to the other side. Now that I've done that, I'm going to drag this zone and place it at the bottom of the map. Okay, and by doing that, once I've got it down there, I'm going to do copy to the other side. All right, so let's switch over to red now. Okay, you'll notice that red has penalty zones on both the north and south borders, but of course blue only has a penalty zone on the south now because we just moved the northern one. So what we can do is come to the red one here and do copy to the other side. So the copy to the other side function, in conjunction with moving the region somewhere else, quickly allows you to duplicate a region on the same side. So this can be very useful for creating multiple penalty zones, multiple deployment zones, whatever you like. So copy to other side has some really useful functionality. Right. Now, what I can do here, and again, I'm going to use the copy to feature to do it. I'm going to take one of these, move it down here, and I'm basically going to resize it so that it fits the right-hand side of the map. And again, I'll try to get it square and then sort of slide it into position. And again, there's some playing around here. Now you'll notice up here at the top, it's obviously a little too long, so we're going to shrink it a little, about half the distance, because it does it equally on either end. And then we'll slide it down again. And actually, I'm going to bring it down a little bit smaller. For now, I'm just going to park it right here. Let's switch back to blue, and let's do a copy to other side on this northern one so we get the northern one back there on the red side. Okay, we'll switch back to red now. Okay, so now we have penalty zones on both edges, which will allow us to size this center one a little more easily. So we'll split the difference basically between the two. Say something about like that, and then stretch it out. All right. This is a nice advantage of the copy function is that once I've got it sized like this and in position, all I have to do is do a copy and copy it over. So I'll right click, copy to other side, go to the blue side, going to drag it on the blue side over to the left hand side of the map. And try to get it as accurately positioned as I can, and then do a copy to other side. All right. Now if I go back to red, you can see red has all four, and to give blue all four, I just need to do a copy to other side on this one. All right. If we now flip back and forth between the two, you'll see that we have four borders on each edge of each map. So that's a very quick way to create penalty zones. And as I said earlier, penalty zones are really just there to help keep the player honest. Allows you to perhaps set areas of the map that you don't want the players to go in. There may be a strategic or tactical reason why you don't want enemy or friendly units in there. Just set a penalty zone, and they'll pay the cost if they decide to ignore your restriction. So very handy stuff, penalty zones. All right, before we call it quits, let's make sure to do a save here. So we're going to just do File Save. It already knows the name, so it doesn't prompt us. And with that, we're done. And come on back for episode 4, which should be posted up in a couple of days. Thanks for watching.